When you go to vote this year, what do you want the future to look like? That's the question that needs to be asked. What do you want the future to look like? We're going to discuss that here right now. My name is Dean Charles. This is Between the Left and a Hard Place, and let's get to it. What do you want the future to look like? I'm talking to you, especially young kids, because young kids don't seem to grasp what they really want, what they're looking for in the future. They want things to be cheaper. They want things to be given to them. But what do you want it to look like? How are you going to get there? Because if we use New York as an example, where you elected a socialist mayor, all Zohar Mamdani is offering you when he offered affordability, he talked all the time, affordability, right? That's his whole big thing, right? Well, what are you affording? Because in New York City, which is a really freaking old city, the infrastructure is old and needs to be replaced. The buildings, the subway, the streets, everything about it, plumbing, electricity, just the infrastructure and the buildings and the walls and how they were made. They were made really, really well, but they're 100 years old. Right? So what is Mayor Mamdani offering you? He's offering you possibly, he can't even guarantee it, but he's possibly offering you to live in shit cheaper, right? Not to take what's there and make it better, not to move New York City into the future, but take what's there and let you live there cheaper. So great, you get to live in shit cheaper, right? Because that's all New York City is. It's becoming shit. The buildings are too old. You see, landlords can't afford to improve their buildings, their structures, the apartments that you live in, or the offices that you work in, because no one can pay enough rent to fix it. The infrastructure problems are enormous, right? Affordability means affordability for everybody, not just the person renting the apartment, but how's the person that owns the apartment going to fix it up? How are they going to transform it into a building of the future? How are you going to build new buildings, futuristic buildings? Don't you think about what the future could look like 50 years from now? If you're in your 20s and 40, 50 years from now, what do you want the world to look like? I'm in my 60s. What do you want the world to look like when you're in your 60s? Seriously, you need to think about that, because when I was your age, we thought about it all the time. And you know what? We build new buildings, we build new cities, and even those are getting old now. How is that going to move forward? How are we going to transform the way we live, where we live, how we live? Don't you want fresh food that's healthy, fresh food? Don't you want entertainment and enough money to spend so that you can live a happy, fun life, have rewarding jobs that you like? I don't understand what you're thinking about, what you think could happen, what you think the future looks like. I don't know if you're even thinking about it. You're looking at in New York City as the example. You're not looking at what New York City has to become in order to maintain itself. You're just looking at we want free shit. We need free shit because we can't afford to live here. And that's backwards thinking as far as I'm concerned. You need to decide and figure out how New York City is going to move into the future. You're only thinking about how much fun you can have now. Why can't I have more fun now? Why can't I be a billionaire right now? Why can't I live that life right now? It doesn't work that way. You have to build something. You have to be part of building something. And when you expand that out into America, you could start with the big cities, besides New York or with New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Miami, Dallas, the list goes on. And where are people going to move to? And where are these cities going to be created? Where is the next futuristic city in the United States? Are we ever going to compete with, say, Dubai in creating a city that moves into the future, or life in the future? What is life in the future going to be like? What do you want it to be like? This all comes down to who you vote for, right? When you're voting for someone, please pay attention to what their ambitions are for the future, what their outlook is for the future. A lot of you young kids are divided along racial lines, along history. Like, what did history do to certain people? How did history affect, everybody? Why not look how the future is going to affect everybody? We all know history, and history's convoluted. It's become convoluted, and I don't understand why either. I don't understand that at all, how history has become so convoluted. But what does the future look like? When you're looking to vote for candidates, I can talk about a few things that you need to think about. I think that, you need to eliminate age limits, term limits, and definitely don't let politicians, buy and sell stock. Insider trading should be made illegal in all elected officials in the whole United States. We need to end things like Citizens United needs to come to an end. We need to end Citizens United. Citizens United is a Supreme Court case that allows these super PACs, take money from billionaires as much as they want to support a candidate, right? So I don't think people realize how many super PACs there are out there, how much money is given to these PACs to influence elections. I mean, there's a flip side to that, because if you look at a lot of elections throughout the United States, a lot of money gets pumped into certain economies where there's tight races, a ton of money. Look at Georgia, for example, and their Senate races, because they have runoffs and they have another election. And I mean, the amount of money that's gone into the last few Georgia Senate races is enormous. The state of Georgia has made so much money off of some of their elections, and they're not the only ones. I'm just pointing them out because I think they've made the most, right? But elections are moneymakers, and in one respect, the money comes straight from the wealthy into the state coffers, right? It's a direct transfer of wealth from the wealthy to the people in a lot of respects. So in that fashion, it's sort of not a bad thing. But when you're talking about influencing elections, though, that kind of money influences elections. We've all seen it. We all saw it. Everyone talks about AIPAC and Elon Musk, right? Those are the two things that people talk about the most, but they're not the only ones. They're not even at the top of the list, as far as money spent. And people, you should look at the lists and see where money's spent. So, so those are four things that I think people need. You need to vote candidates in that will eliminate those four things. That would be the first step in looking towards the future. Because then you'll get politicians who really want to be politicians, right? That's what we're looking for. People who really want to be politicians. People who really, truly want to help. People who want to move forward. People who are not, biased by supporters and donors, whether they're from in this country or out of this country. We want people to be American. If you want to live in America, you should be American. That's what it's always been. That's how America's grown. You have to understand that. If I'm all for immigrants and coming here legally, and but if you come to America, no matter how you get here, even, you got to want to be American. You want to have the American dream of opportunity. Opportunity is what drives the American dream. There always has to be opportunity available. How are we going to do that? Who are you going to vote for matters when it comes to that. That's the people you need to vote for. You can't be voting for people who don't believe in that, I personally don't believe the socialists have that in mind. What the future is going to look like. How are you going to create opportunity? Yes, there's a lot of things that needs more common sense, like healthcare, right? We need to have better healthcare in this country. There just needs to be better healthcare. But somebody needs to think of it. I know people that are in the healthcare industry that have good ideas. Nobody's listening to them. We need people that'll listen to good ideas and implement them. If you can't see what actually needs to be done, then this is it's going to end badly. We're going to end in revolution. We're going to end in the United States separating, right? I don't know what a civil war in the United States would look like, but it's a possibility. It's definitely a possibility. So who you vote for matters. One of the other things that I think people need to take a hard look at is Section 230. Do you know what Section 230 is? I've talked about it before. Section 230 allows the owners of the social media platforms to not be responsible for the content that's written on their platforms. And that needs to be looked at. I don't know what the answer is. I don't have a solution. I know it can't be the way it is. They have to take some responsibility, because they create the algorithms that you listen to, that you hear, that you watch. The companies determine what you watch. So if they're going to determine what you watch, they need to take some responsibility. That's my opinion. Section 230 needs to be looked at. And President Trump talked about how Section 30 needs to be looked at for a long time, until he decided he would own a social media platform. And since he owns Truth Social, he never talks about it anymore. You never hear him talk about it anymore. Even though there's many things I agree with President Trump on, there's something I don't agree with him on. There's many things I don't. Section 230 is something he had said he would look at, and now that he owns Truth Social, he doesn't look at it anymore. But these are some of the problems and some of the things people need to look at. So when you're going to the voting booth, this is what you need to keep in mind. You can call me boomer boy all you want. I'm just a boomer. I don't know what I'm talking about. But one thing about being a boomer, I don't want to be an elected official. I'm too old for that, right? I feel like I'm too old for that. I really think you should be looking at how you're going to move into the future. What does the future look like when you vote? Vote for the future of what you and your kids and your grandkids are going to experience. And what do you want them to experience? Do you want them to have freedom? Because that's freedom and opportunity. That's the most important thing. Think about it. Comment. Let me know.